Well, hello, confirmands. How are you? I hope you're well. I hope your Christmas was good. That Santa left you neither cold nor a switch. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, talk to your grandparents. Those are echoes of a time where people were more robust and strong than they are now. So again, we're doing a bunch of videos early, and it's easy to wander into the wrong lesson. This is the lesson for year 3 of confirmation on the early church and Lutheran Christianity. It's lesson 12, and it's the lesson that's scheduled for January 3rd, 2024. So if all those things line up for you, then you're in the right place at the right time. Again, grateful to all of you who put your names on your papers. Some of you have started, seeing how small you can write on how small a piece of paper. That's a game that I hope you enjoy. It's not my favorite game, but if you wanted to print the lesson that I send out to you, that would be grand. If you wanted to use a full-size piece of paper, that would also be grand. But it's a game I can live with. The folding your lesson into something that is been folded 38,000 times, that's weird, but I can live with that too. It just is sort of odd. All right. So remember back when we started this survey of the 10 Commandments, I said that different churches have different numbering systems for the commandments, that the first commandment, you shall have no other gods. Some churches say that next part, don't make any idols, is its own commandment, right? And that they have a different numbering system for everything that goes on, right? That for them, you shall have no other gods, don't make an idol, don't misuse the name of the Lord, right? And then their fourth commandment is about Sabbath. We think that it's pretty obvious from context that not making an idol is part of not having any other God. And so that's why we use the numbering we do. But here's where it gets messy for us. 9 and 10 are clearly about the same sort of stuff. It's all about coveting. It's all about envy. And so, we have 2 commandments that say basically versions of the same thing. So at the beginning, we think they're wrong. At the end, they think we're wrong. Again, we're not going to fight about it, but today we're going to do the 9th and 10th commandments. If you printed your lessons, and I hope you always do, you see that we got 4 pages. So it's going to be a longer video. Maybe you want to go get yourself a cool drink or something. Luckily you can pause and stop and start as you need to. But we'll try to keep moving. I'll try to keep my side stories to a minimum, and we'll get this material in. The phrase that pays this week is not from Martin Luther. It's from Margaret Thatcher, who is a Prime Minister of Great Britain. I think she was the first female Prime Minister of Great Britain. Her nickname was the Iron Lady, but this week, not Martin Luther. We get the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher. That'll be the last 2 words, but you could put them in right now, Margaret Thatcher. Those are the last 2 words of the phrase that pays. The first 3 words are the Spirit of. The Spirit of. All right, let's jump in. The 9th commandment itself, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. And then Luther's explanation from the Small Catechism, right? Again, not part of the Bible. This is Luther now. He's going to talk to you. What is this? What does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we do not try to trick our neighbors out of their inheritance or property or try to get it for ourselves by claiming to have a legal right to it and the like. But instead, be of help and service to them in keeping what is theirs. And then from the Bible, Exodus 20, verse 17, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. 17a. Remember the A's and the B's? Right? It's when you divide a verse. First part is A, second part's B. You can divide it A, B, C. Right, same rules apply. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. So the 9th and 10th commandments absolutely overlap, right? And for the person who thinks they've kept the first 8, first, you're a fool if you think you have. None of us do, not ever. But if you think you have, 9th and 10th commandments represent an enormous break with the world. That to do this is to say that you are on a different page with different priorities than the world has and under which the world operates, right? We are called to be different from the world. Jesus says that we're supposed to be salt, which is a preservative and a flavor enhancer of the world, that we're supposed to be light, for the world, that we're supposed to be yeast, just a little yeast mixed in, leavens the whole dough, that we're supposed to be different. We're not supposed to be just like the world. It should make a difference that we're the people of God. It should make a difference that we say that we follow Jesus. If we're just like the herd, then what good is this religion of ours, right? We're called to be different, and we're supposed to help our neighbors keep what is theirs. In a world that celebrates people who take from people, who accumulate, who amass at others' expense, we're supposed to help our neighbor keep what is his or hers. We're not even supposed to desire what isn't ours, right? Even if we could legally pursue it, even if we could legally try to take it for ourselves, if it belongs to our neighbor, we're supposed to help our neighbor keep it. Even if people think that would think that we were smart or wily for pursuing those things and getting ahead, that's not who we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to want what belongs to someone else. Now, I'm not talking about aspiration here, right? That if you look around the world and you would like someday to own your own house and own your own car, and you understand that to do that you need to go to school and apply yourself and then find an occupation, a vocation, where you can serve your neighbor in exchange for money, great. That's not what we're talking about, right? Ask the aspirations of youth. Now what we're talking about is that you're trying to get something to which you have no right, okay? So in the ninth commandment, when it says that we're not supposed to covet our neighbor's house, that word house means the sum total of all of their property, right? It includes the house in which they live, but it also includes their car and their bank account and their retirement account, right? And this coveting of someone else's house, the first time you're likely to run into it is dealing with inheritances or estates. When someone has died and left their house, right? Not just their physical house, their dwelling, but the sum total of all of their stuff, right? And you know, that's their house. And one of the most shocking parts of my job is how little money it takes to turn families against each other, right? I mean, you might think that families would go to war for, you know, $5 million. If there was $5 million in an estate, in a house, well, yeah, you can see siblings fighting over that, right? Or people going to war over that. But it's crazy how small the number is that people will go to war over, right? You know, this commemorative plate from the 1976 Olympics, you know, Mom said I was supposed to have that, and that guy over there took it. I hate him. I mean, it goes crazy so fast, and everyone is the hero of their own story, and everyone is looking for ways that they've been offended and disrespected. I'm not talking about your family. I hope it never happens in your family. But baby, it happens. And it happens more than you think, right? And you're never supposed to be a part of it, right? If someone takes Mom's 1976 commemorative plate from the Olympics, I mean, you're allowed to say, you know, you see the masking tape on the back of it that has my name on it, that's supposed to go to me, right? That's fine. I'm not asking you to be a total doormat. I'm just asking you not to go to war with family about ridiculous little sums of money. I don't want you to go to war with family over big sums of money. And again, the only time where I would support you is if, you know, someone is being profoundly dishonest and you have reason to believe that dishonesty would extend beyond you. Then you have an obligation as a Christian to protect your neighbors, society, from this dishonest person, all right? But you got to have your head in the right place. You got to have your heart in the right place, right? It's even worse than that. That sometimes you got heirs, people who will inherit the money, that are making care decisions for the older generation, and sometimes it sure looks like they're making decisions that are designed to hasten death, right? That, you know, Mom really, really needs to be in a protective environment. She really needs to be in a care facility. She's going to die if we leave her in that house, you know, with her level of dementia and her level of confusion. You know, I mean, last week she put the flour in the refrigerator and the newspaper in the oven. and it's just desperately dangerous, and you'll have heirs going, well, you know, that nursing care, that's awful expensive. Yeah, it is. It's crazy expensive. I mean, you have no idea. It's way cheaper to go to Hawaii and stay in the Hilton than it is to go to a nursing home, right? But sometimes people need care, and heirs should be thinking about what is necessary for the person who earned the money, who has the house, who has the estate, and not about how to save money that isn't theirs that puts this person's life at risk, right? I mean, you gotta have your head and the heart in the right place. And sometimes, rarely, people are pretty open about it, right? You know, when mom dies, that's my money, and why would we burn it all up on nursing homes, right? Usually that's not said out loud, but it's there. It's a grievous sin. A lot of times people who are doing this, they're so detached from their own moral lives that they're not cognizant, they're not aware that that's the decision they're making, but it is. And I want you to go through your life thinking about every decision in terms of the commandments, in terms of the law of God, in terms of your responsibilities to your neighbors, so that you won't blindly wander into such a grievous sin where you're letting mom die so that the money she and dad worked for their whole lives, so more of it can come to you. You know what I'm saying? If you spend your whole life practicing moral conversation with yourself, if you spend your whole life practicing moral conversation with the people around you, then when you get to these really difficult things where you're tempted to drift into something that benefits you without thinking too deeply about it, there'll be this lifetime of habit that snaps you back. And there'll be these relationships that snap you back into a fuller sense of yourself, right? I mean, if you come to the point where you want to let mom die early because you're worried about how much money you're going to get, you have enormous moral issues going on. Can we agree on that? Okay. Bottom line, it's not your money. It's not your money until the person who dies is gone and the estate clears probate, that a judge or a lawyer says, this is your money. And then it's your money. But until that moment, it's not your money, and you have a responsibility to do whatever's best for the person who holds the house, who holds the money, right? If mom is confused, then your responsibility is to help mom live in dignity and do the things that she would have done when she was in full control of her facilities. It's your job to help her carry on her life. And if that means she dies broke and you don't get to go to Paris, that's what that means. Earn your own money and go to Paris, right? It's all in bold print there, so you can read it to yourself 19 times. It's not your money. It belongs to whomever has it until they give it to you, right? And again, just because mom wrote on the back of the plate that this is going to go to you, it's not your plate until mom is gone and the distribution happens, right? But until that happens, it's their money. Next three words of the phrase that pays: envy can destroy, with a semicolon, right? Envy can destroy, with a semicolon. That's three words. We're up to 6 words total now. Okay. You do want to be on God's side regarding someone else's house, right? So you shouldn't use the law as an instrument of personal power and gain. The purpose of the law is to protect the weak and the innocent. It doesn't exist to help you take advantage of others. There are people around us, some of whom have risen quite high in our society, who have a habit of using the law to advance their own interests and to hurt the little people. That's not the purpose of the law, and that puts you on the opposite side from God, which ought to slow you down quite a bit, right? If you need the law and if you can use it rightly to pursue justice, great. But if you're using the law to get your hands on someone else's money because you want it, no. You're supposed to be of help and service to your neighbor, especially your family, in keeping what is theirs, right? So when mom starts to fail, and if you're a medical power of attorney or a financial power of attorney, that you have responsibility for medical decisions or financial decisions, your job is to help mom be mom, not to preserve the house for you. Okay? And there's a test here that if you can't rejoice in the blessings that your family members experience, there really is something wrong with you. right? If your brother or sister buys a bigger house than you have and you're jealous, you have a problem, right? If your brother gets a new car, if your cousin buys a cabin and you're jealous, you have a problem. In what world would it be inappropriate for you to be glad that your cousin has a cabin or your brother has a car or some family member got a new house? You should be delighted for them. Or aren't you a good person? I mean, this commandment diagnoses. It cuts a pretty sharp line pretty fast between good people and bad people, right? And you know, I'm not going to pretend I've always been on the side of the angels on this one, but I'm fighting that I want to be a person that keeps these rules, that is delighted when my brothers and my cousins do well, gain financial security or gain opportunities. I think it's in the high 90s, you know, that I'm delighted for the people around me as they succeed, but I want to be at 100% and not have it be about me at all, right? Okay, other things to think about here. Family farms and businesses, right? That it gets really muddled who belongs, or you know, who owns what and who has what coming, and it can really go bad kind of fast. You know, that everyone thinks they're getting an equal share, but one person is really working hard and another person is not working at all, and one third person is mailing it in, right? So it's really a good thing to get the lawyers involved early, to spend the money, to figure out, you know, who's going to get what and how the distribution is going to happen and how the inheritance is going to happen and who's entitled to what. So everybody knows what's going on as clearly as possible. And you tell everybody, right? Everybody gets the information they need. You have all the hard conversations, you know, Billy, I'm sorry, Susie's going to get the farm. She's the one who's working it, and you haven't done anything, you know, since you left for college when you were 18. There will be some distribution for you in the estate, but Susie's going to get the farm because she's spent the last 19 years working it, right, and keeping it afloat. You have to have that conversation. You can't wait until you're gone and let Susie and Billy go to war in a lawyer's office, you know, and have it spill into different lawyers and courts and the whole thing. Because Billy thinks just because of his bloodline, he deserves half the farm that Susie's worked to keep afloat. So, you know, have the conversations. If parents or grandparents come to you and they want to have a distribution conversation with you or an inheritance conversation with you, man, do your absolute best to shut up. It's their money. And if you do well in that conversation, good. If your siblings or your cousins do well, try to be glad for them. Right? If there's something manifestly unjust, listen first to the person who's talking and then try to figure it out later with your moral community that we've talked about. Right? I mean, sometimes parents and grandparents make mistakes. Right? So then you have some really hard talks. But again, try not to punish people who are trying to keep family peace by having hard talks in advance. When you're a parent or a grandparent, right, be clear. Don't manipulate children or grandchildren by dangling inheritances, right? You know, if you were to do this for me, it might show up in my will, you know, that you were a good boy or a good girl. Don't do that. Right? Now, I know a guy who had some money, and he kept track. For the last 20 years of his life, he was in pretty bad health. And a lot of that was shut up in a care facility. And he kept a list of people who wrote to him, people who contacted him, people who called him, people who visited him, right? For the 20 years where he was vulnerable. And when he died, those people shared in his estate. And blood relatives who had ignored him for 20 years in his need got bupkis. Nothing, right? And some of them were pretty mad. I was totally on his side. Just because you're in someone's bloodline doesn't mean that you're entitled to something. That's violating this commandment. That you want something that you're not entitled to just because of the blood in your veins. No, right? That's not how it works. It was his money, and he did what he saw fit with it. And if that left out blood relatives who'd ignored him until the lawyer called for the reading of the will, I'm okay with that, right? Don't covet. So explain to your children, your grandchildren, why you're doing what you're doing, right? Listen to them, but do everything in your power so that they don't go to war after you die. The next two words of the phrase that pays, it can. It can. So you should be up to 8 words total now. The 10th commandment. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox, or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Right? So that's the commandment. Luther's explanation in the Small Catechism. What is this? What does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we do not entice, force, or steal away from our neighbors their spouses, household workers, or livestock, but instead urge them to stay and fulfill their responsibilities to our neighbors. Boy, there's a lot there. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor, from Exodus 20, verse 17b. So enticing is the big word here. If the 9th commandment, the big word is house, here the big word is enticing. Don't entice. It means to try to bring over to your side, to try to lure. Enticing is a fancy word for luring, right? Do not entice spouses, right, or employees. Don't even entice pets or livestock. That if your neighbor has something, you shouldn't be trying to lure it over to your side, right? Houses for commandment 9, enticing for commandment 10. So regarding spouses, right, we covered all of this in the 6th commandment, right? Don't work to seduce the spouse of another. Right? Now you might say, I'm not trying to seduce her, right? But I don't want you to be flirty or witty or available, right? She's got her own friends, she's got her own husband, she's got her own family, right? You go be witty with someone who's not married. Right? Now I'm not saying don't be friendly, but make real sure that you're never sort of laying a trail of breadcrumbs that leads her from her husband's bed to your bed, from his arms to your arms, right? That's just wrong. So you be your sparkling, witty self with single people, right? You be as funny as you want to be when couples are together, but don't you dare try to entice a spouse by being available or being nicer than her husband or kinder than her. I mean, whatever it is, don't do it, right? Women, same deal, right? I'm a man talking as a man, but women, same deal. Right? Don't be flirty, don't be extra attractive or available. Don't let him know that he has other opportunities, other possibilities. You don't work to alienate people in a marriage from each other so that you have the opportunity to swoop in, right? I mean, let's just count the commandments that we're breaking here, right? We're breaking this one about coveting. You want the spouse of another person. You're lying because you're acting deceitfully with both of them. Right? With the one you're trying to seduce, you're just being kind friend. With the spouse, you're trying to swoop their spouse out from under them. Right? So there's lying involved, there's stealing involved, there's committing adultery involved. Jesus says that if you look at someone with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery with them. Right? God's not your highest priority here. Right? So what was that, 5 commandments that just went down by you being witty and flirty and trying to entice a spouse? Don't do it. Remember the phrase that pays in that lesson was, the right person at the wrong time is the wrong person. That if he or she is already partnered, if he or she is already married, leave them alone. That's not your perfect match. That's the wrong person for you. Don't covet, right? Don't try to entice. You're supposed to instead do everything in your power to protect the marriages of your neighbors, right? Everything in your power to keep them married to each other. Now again, if we're talking about abuse, if we're talking about abandonment or addiction or affairs, right, at a certain point marriages can't be saved, and you can help with a safe decoupling, right? But you do it with both of their knowledge, right? If you need to rescue her because he's going to kill her or hurt her, okay, you rescue her, but then, as quickly as possible, you let everybody know what's going on, that you're not trying to pull her into your bed, you're trying to get her out of danger. You're trying to get her out of harm, right? So, otherwise, unless we're talking about those things, you're trying to protect your neighbors' marriages. You're trying to keep them together. You're trying to help each other see how witty and smart and good their own spouse is. I mean, imagine the difference in going to a party where you're trying to entice someone away from their marriage into your arms, where you're, contrast that with when they're together, you're trying to build each of them up so that each of them see each other in a better light, and they leave that party or they leave that dinner feeling better and stronger in their marriages. You can do that. No one will notice, no one will know, but the angels will see it, and our Father in heaven will commend you for it, right? That's a beautiful way for you to spend your life and your time. Do everything in your power to help your neighbor's marriages flourish, right? They got 3 little kids and they're exhausted all the time. You take the kids to a movie or to mini golf so that they can just take a nap, or they can just sit in the porch swing and hold hands and breathe for a little bit. You could help. You could do better. You could bring a tuna casserole over there, right? So that they get a break. What could you do to help your neighbors' marriages flourish, even without having a lot of money, right? You could go mow someone's lawn. You could change their storm windows so that they have some family time with each other. You could do that, right? So go back to the 6th commandment about not committing adultery and live in that. Don't covet your neighbor's spouse. Regarding employees, right? Don't, and this assumes that someday you'll be quite successful, you'll have your own business, and you're looking for employees. Let me tell you what the world thinks you should do. You should figure out, you should always be looking for high quality employees that your neighbor has trained in her business, and you should be trying to steal them. That's just smart, right? That you let your neighbor do all the work of finding a good employee, of training a good employee, of maintaining, helping maintain that employee's attitude, and you just suck them into your business, depriving your neighbor and her business of that employee. The world thinks that's unbelievably smart. But here, you and I aren't supposed to covet our neighbor's slaves, right? In our context, that means that we don't covet their household workers or their employees, right? We don't let our neighbor train and vet our future employees. It's wrong. We think that's a violation of the 10th commandment. So when you find an employee who's doing really well in your neighbor's business, encourage that person to stay there and thrive, right? You're doing a great job. I love coming to this business. I love doing business here because of you. If you really want that person, talk to the competitor, talk to the neighbor, talk to the woman who owns the business, and say, I want to hire, Pete away from you. Pete's got everything I need. I need Pete as the center of my new enterprise. And my guess is that there's a number that the two of you can agree on for fair compensation for Pete. Because you're depriving her of Pete's services, of Pete's attitude, of his leadership on that team. Right? But there's a number where she'd be willing to let you talk to Pete. She might say, Pete's been faithful to me. Pete's helped me build this business up. And if there's a new opportunity for him, I'd be happy for him. Great. Then you go to Pete with a clear heart. And you say, I talked to Tina. She gave me permission to talk to you. I'd like to talk to you about coming to work for me. Right? If you need to, we can pause this conversation and you go check this out with Tina so you know that I'm not lying to you. Great. Right? You could hire Pete as a side gig. Talk to Tina and say, I need someone like Pete to handle my rush hours, right? Between 4 and 7, I really need him at my place. Can I hire him 1/3 time away from you? Right? I'll make it worth his while, and I'll make it worth your while. Or you put a timeline on it, that I need him for 6 months. Can we work something out for 6 months? All of these are respectful things. All of these, you're helping Tina keep her business at a very high level, right? And if you do this right, not only that, but you're showing Tina's other employees the best side of Tina, that she really wants them to succeed, even if it means letting them go, right? So they're going to work harder for her. If you do this right, it could be really good. So you could agree on compensation with Tina to take her best worker. You could agree to let it be a side gig for the best worker for a while, right? There are ways for you to do this with integrity. right? You could ask Tina to train some of your people, because she trained Pete. And you could say to her, can I send a few people over to work for you for a while, right? Let's split their salary, but you'll benefit from their work, because I really admire the kind of employees that you're turning out. You're turning out better employees than I am. I mean, all of these things are beautiful ways. You think Tina's not going to remember that? You think she's not going to throw business your way? You think she's not going to tell her people about you and live the same kind of way? I mean, it could be really, 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 really good. Now, again, I think I told you did I tell you the two words, never build? Maybe I didn't. If you wrote never build before, then ignore this. If you haven't written never build on the phrase that pays, you should write never build. And that's 2 words out of 10, right? So never build. I'm pretty sure I told you it can. So it can never build. So you should have those there. Again, this is a quote by Margaret Thatcher. So you should be up to 12 words total. Right? So the last 4 words are never build, Margaret Thatcher. Now, in the church, this happens all the time. This trying to steal a good pastor from another church. Right? The people go on vacation and they see a good pastor, they hear her give a good sermon, and they immediately recommend her to the call committee of their church. We got to get this woman at our church because she is really smart. And she's young and she could be here for a long time, and this is the woman we want. And the church you're at can pay more than the church she's at. It's got opportunities for her family. She's working, she's in Rosholt, and you're in Amherst, and obviously it's better to be in Amherst than in Rosholt, right? We all understand that, right? So call committees, when I leave this place, I don't know, I don't have any plans to leave. I don't know when it's going to happen. That's in God's hands, right? When I leave here, the 2 churches will get together and they'll form a joint call committee. So it'll be, 6 to 8 people whose job it is to find a new pastor for the 2 churches. And that call committee will interface with the bishop, and they'll interact with the bishop's assistants, and they'll have all kinds of forms to fill out and questionnaires, and they'll circulate stuff in the congregations, and they'll have meetings in the congregations to try to figure out, what kind of pastor we want. Do we want a pastor that's really good at pastoral care? Do we want one that really gives a good sermon? Do we want a pastor that's really good at raising money? Right? That's going to be a really important gift in coming years as the rural church struggles and declines. Do we want a pastor who wants to stay here a long time? Do we want someone who's young and vibrant but who might leave in a couple of years? Do we want to ride a roller coaster, be excited for a couple of years but then have to start all over again? Or do we want someone who's a little slower, a little more sedate, but probably going to stay here for 10 years? Right? And again, none of us know the future. You might hire someone young and they might be in a car accident. You might hire someone, who's middle-aged, like I was when I came here, and you stuck with them for 27 years and counting. Right? So God knows the future. We don't know the future. But call committees will try to figure out what it is exactly that we're looking for the next pastor. And one of the things the call committees will do is that they will say to people, have you run into a really exciting, vibrant pastor someplace? Give us the name, and we'll call them and see if they're interested in moving. All right, now, so far, there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Where it gets yucky is that if you don't have a concern for the church or the ministry that the pastor is currently leading, if you just want what you want because you want it. We want this pastor, and we don't care what it will do to that other church. We don't care what it'll do to that other ministry. Right? I mean, imagine the church has been in free fall for years. This other church has been in free fall for years. They had a problem with the previous pastor that crossed boundaries and hurt people. This new pastor came in and has spent, 10 or 12 years getting the people to trust again, rescuing the reputation of the church. They're just on the verge where they can start to do something again, and you want to yank that pastor out because they're a good, stable, decent pastor. I totally get why you want that. But could we at least pause and think about that other church where that pastor is still working. Do they need that pastor more than you do? Right? And the whole thing can get pretty slippery and pretty selfish pretty fast. It can turn into I want what I want, and we dress it up in the God clothes, right? We put the God lights on it, right? The Lord wants us to have this kind of pastor in our midst to be our spiritual leader and guardian of our souls. Yeah, but I haven't heard you care a bit about that other church where that pastor's leaving. So talk to the prospective pastor about it. You know, you call them up and you say, if you're on the call committee, would you be interested in talking to us about coming to Peace in Nelsonville? And if they say, you know, my work here isn't done, Pastor, thank you so very much for your time. God bless you in your work. Right? That's it. That's the end of that conversation. Right? If there's openness, I'd be okay talking. I don't think that it's time for me to move, but I'd be okay talking. Right? Then you make sure everyone understands that's the date we're going to have. Right? Pastor comes, you pay her mileage. Right? You put her in a hotel. She doesn't want to stay with parishioners. She doesn't. I mean, you're very nice people, but that means she's on the entire time. She's interviewing the entire time. Put her in a hotel. Right? Pay her mileage. Have a conversation, and at the start of the conversation say, Pastor has done good work in Rosholt for 12 years. She still thinks she has work to do there, but she's willing to talk to us about what we need to think with us and discern with us about, you know, where the edge of her call there is, and is there potential for a call here. And if a pastor tells you, you know, interviews with you and says, I don't know. I don't know. Well, you know, then your job is to recognize that that's a good thing. That he loves the people he's with and cares about them. And is not just jumping ship to be with you because you offer 4% more money, or, you know, whatever the perk is. Right? I have been of use to our bishop for years, not since my stroke. I'm going to have to talk to the bishop about that. I've been of use to the bishops for years that I go and I do practice interviews with call committees, right? And some of them, because they don't know what they're doing at the start. So, you know, I'm not moving, so I'm going to come and I'm going to interview with you. And somewhere in the middle of some of those, it turns where we're not practicing anymore, where they're kind of interested in bringing me to their church. And I have to stop and tell them, you know, this is a practice, right? Because they stop thinking about practice. They stop thinking about, they stop thinking completely about Peace in Nelsonville and the work that I still have here, right, or what my family needs, and they just want me. It's a really good feeling. I mean, just in terms of my feelings, you feel like a king. But it's important that everyone keeps straight. And there have been times where churches have pursued Pastor Gretchen and I, and we took more time to think than they thought we should have. That we were trying to weigh, you know, whether our work here was really done, you know, and if we should be thinking about somewhere else. And they would get mad, like we were insulting them somehow by not jumping at this opportunity to be with them. I think if you're interviewing a pastor, right, and they have a sense of love and responsibility for the people they're with, that's a good thing. And if that means that pastor doesn't come to you, that's okay, because you're not supposed to be coveting the pastor of some other community. You're just trying to figure out where people are supposed to be, right? So we don't punish pastors for that. And, you know, if you really think that this pastor, this woman, is really the future of your church, you could ask the bishop if you could have a meeting in the bishop's office with leaders from that other church and just lay it all out in full honesty. You know, we really think that your pastor is who we're supposed to have to do the ministry God has in front of us. But she still feels like she has work to do among you, and we want to involve you in this conversation. I mean, that would be an amazingly respectful thing to do, right? For one thing, those other folks are going to treat their pastor better because they know she has options, right? They're going to feel loved in a way they haven't before, that the pastor isn't just jumping to greener pastures right? Jumping the fence to greener grass, because they feel, that pastor feels love and responsibility for the church they're in. Sometimes people wonder, does the pastor really love us? Well, you would know. You would know. So this coveting thing, this is big. And again, the word here in the 10th commandment is entice. That we don't want to lure people to us when they still have responsibilities other places, right? And not even pets. It's not a good thing if the neighbor's dog likes you better than the dog likes the neighbor, right? Just let the neighbor have their dog. You get your own dog. Let people have their own relationships. You get your own relationships. And if you're in a position of responsibility where you're looking for an employee or a pastor, right, make sure that you're aware of how that decision impacts other people other than you, right? Don't covet. Don't covet your neighbor's house. Don't entice the people that are connected to your neighbor. So says God. All right, so again, this is, I think I messed up the phrase that pays, but I think we rescued it. This is the lesson for January 3rd, the first lesson of the new year. And I am delighted that we have the opportunity to meet together and to talk with one another. I really love our Wednesday nights. You take care of yourself. Bye-bye.